processes, so pardon me if I gloss over some things. If there's anything you want to add, feel free to like shout out and put something in there. If you know some local bit of information that you want to add in, just holler and interrupt me. So the first two processes we're going to talk about are mountaintop removal and tar sands extraction up in Alberta, Canada. And both of these processes are big strip mining processes. And like the tar sands are scraping into huge areas of the boreal forest up in Alberta, Canada, and other areas up north. And they're taking this sand that has, it's like bitumen, it's got a little bit of oil in it. It's called tar sands. And they take it and they just rake off huge sections of these boreal forests and then pull the stuff in, and they process it using a ton of water and a bunch of natural gas. It takes a lot of heat to be able to process this stuff. And so we get a lot of leftover toxic wastewater, massive ponds of toxic water left over, and also huge pipelines being put in to pipe in natural gas to run this refinery process. This is a very inefficient form of oil extraction. And mountaintop removal, they basically take the top of the mountain, and this is mainly going on in Appalachia, but it's starting to creep over into the Powder River Basin and other areas in the United States. And they're starting to do stuff in Utah too. So it's coming out west. They blow the top of the mountain off, and they use these huge machines to drag, there's a drag line right there, to scoop up the coal, and they wash some of the toxins off of it so it can be burned in accordance with the Clean Air Act. And then they have these huge dams filled with the toxic byproduct from the washing of this coal, and basically a big frickin' mess. They put all of the top of the mountain, all of that biodiverse forest that they scraped off, all of the toxic arsenic coal, and they push it. They push all the waste into this and bury the streams on the side of the mountain and leave this like vast, flat, soilless mess behind, and it is really affecting the waterways. And the next thing is this process that is used to extract natural gas and oil called hydrofracking. And hydrofracking has been around for the last 30 or 40 years, but really, as we learned today, the oldest frack site is in New Mexico. So y'all might know about this.
Can you give an idea of the size in square miles or otherwise of one of those mountaintopping spaces?
Huge. Like, it's hard to measure exactly the square footage or square acreage because they kind of follow the mountain range, and they like mine the sites in sections, so it's hard. But like the amount of mountaintop removal land that's happened is estimated to be, and it's like the size of Manhattan, or like the size of the island of New York. I can't remember what that name of that place is called, but if you put it together, it's a bunch of acres. And
over 500 named mountaintops in Appalachia have been destroyed. So if you can imagine any of the mountains around here, 500 of those have just been like leveled.
And like 2,000 miles of stream have been buried by the waste, like in the valleys.
And these are the headwaters of the streams that support most of the cities on the East Coast. So it's a big deal. They're poisoning, very major waterways that a lot of people drink from. Hydrofracking is a little different. So as I said, it's been around for 30 or 40 years, but in the last 4 or 5 years, they've started doing a different process with it, using more chemicals, and have developed a bigger industrial scale process with it. That they've started to use to extract hard-to-get-to natural gas in these deposits called oil shale. So what they do is they drill down to the oil shale, and then they drill sideways for up to 1/4 of a mile, and they pump this. They pump this long drilling hole full of water and undisclosed chemicals, and sand or ceramic beads, and then they put it under high pressure, and in some cases use explosives to crack open the oil shale, and then the sand and the chemicals rush in and hold open those cracks so that the oil and the natural gas can kind of percolate out. They then suck that wastewater back up, and inject it into injection wells, and this stuff is toxic from from the chemicals that they initially put in this water. They have known carcinogens in them. They won't tell us what's in it, and it's radioactive from the nature of the of the oil shale that's underneath. So it's really nasty water, and it uses how much water? Just like tons and thousands of gallons.
They measure it in the truck loads that they bring in, and it's substantial. It's like, I think it's over 100.
Over 100 trucks.
For like one well.
Yeah, and just very briefly, this has poisoned numerous aquifers up in northern Colorado. There's people's well water faucets will light on fire, so there's natural gas percolating into the water table, and also the issue of what do we do with this waste afterwards. And so back to coal. So in a way, we're winning right now because the U.S. consumption of coal for keeping the lights on and for the creation of energy has gone down, in no small part due to the efforts of lots of people who have been pushing to shut down coal plants in the U.S. But we're not really winning because coal exports are growing. So we're still extracting tons of coal, and we're speeding up our process of extraction, and we're sending it all over to the places that are producing all the goods that we buy.
You got to tie the two things you just said before together, because 95% of our coal is used for electric generation. We've gone down from 51% generation 10 years ago to 39% this year. But the reason is natural gas.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's what we're trying to
Gotta
connect.
tie.
Yeah.
That's where we're going.
Okay.
We're trying, we're giving some context for what's going on, and then we're gonna be. That's like the. You already jumped. You got there. Punchlines, right? So yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
So we've had two major areas that we've produced all of our coal from, and that's West Virginia and Appalachia.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, Appalachia, and the Powder River Basin in Wyoming. We're starting to hit the tail end of coal extraction in Appalachia, but in the Powder River Basin, we're starting to see an increase, and we're also starting to see coal being. Oh, you had graphics. Oh, so the expanding export market, which was all the stuff we're sending everywhere else, creates room for new mines, and we're starting to have mines in areas.
Like Montana?
Like Montana.
And also Alaska.
And also Alaska.
Like I'm getting ahead of ourselves, but we bees were just invited up to Alaska in August, and it was really amazing. Because they're like 1/8 of the world's coal's in Alaska. I didn't know that. I've been working on coal issues for 3 years, and Alaska has more coal reserves than all the lower 48.
There's also like 150 years worth of coal in the San Juan Basin and the Navajo Nation and all of that, and
Yeah.
plants nearby.
Yeah, and like we're kind of going fast, but the main point that we're saying here is that Appalachia has been a big place of coal production for a long time, and what the trend is that all this stuff is moving west. The reason we're doing this tour is because natural gas, tar sands, coal mining, uranium mining, we're seeing a boom of all of these things in the western kind of Intermountain West region, from Montana all the way down to Mexico. So, and yes, a lot of coal is in the north, the Navajo Nation area. We mentioned it. Yeah, it was real wrong.
It's not makes us sad because we're mining more coal. That's the graphics there. So we're starting to see an expansion of the infrastructure to get the coal from the Powder River Basin and other areas where we're still mining it out to the coast so that we can send it over to places like China. And so this is proposed railways and ports of export.
Oil.
So I'm sure I feel a little
You're okay. It's
weird
good.
about this thing.
Yeah, we're not our content, so we're going to try to do our best. So, okay, that was the context of coal, just like what's going on, where some of the regional fights are, like, and Black Mesa has been an ongoing struggle for 40 years and is still a contemporary struggle, and is actually represented in the poster. But another thing that's like going on with, we all just went through the election season, and we both heard how Romney and Obama were like, well, we're producing more oil than ever. And a lot of that has to do with hydraulic fracturing for oil in the Dakotas. But there's also this whole other thing with the Keystone XL pipeline. Have folks been hearing a little bit about that? Yeah, not. Okay, so just the graph, the point of this graph is to show that actually we import most of our oil in the world from Canada, or most of U.S. oil imports come from Canada, more than any of the combined countries of the Middle East. So they're like the biggest supporter, contributor of U.S. oil. And Canada has been, this graph is this interesting thing, just to show that like Canada's oil production is actually kind of remained kind of the same, or their consumption has stayed the same, but the production has been increasing, and this is because of tar sands. Like, tar sands is Canada's biggest source of oil, and they're exporting it all over the world. And so, because there's been this like huge push for tar sands oil, a lot of the struggles that are going on around fossil fuel extraction struggles around the country are like extraction-based, so points of extraction, but also are infrastructural. So like this is the network of pipelines that like the tar sands are like right up here that are needed to get this sweet crude or this heavy crude to port. So they're building a lot of pipelines that go out to the coast. Like this is the Enbridge pipeline, the guy whose quote we used at the beginning, like the Enbridge pipeline goes from the tar sands to the port of Kitimat in British Columbia. And then the Keystone XL is this guy that comes down to the Gulf of Mexico, and then this is the Trailbreaker, sorry, this is our friend from Maine, so I'm pointing it out. This is the Trailbreaker pipeline that they're putting through into Maine. So they're trying to get all the oceans, right?
And these are proposed natural gas pipelines coming down to fuel the processing plants for those tar sands to turn them into oil.
And there's one more. And so there's lots of pipeline building, and then there's also lots of port building to get this stuff actually shipped, right? Okay, so bringing us to the Keystone XL pipeline struggle, there's a place in Oklahoma called Cushing, Oklahoma. Has anyone ever heard of Cushing? Not many. One person. Okay, so not many people have. I didn't until our friend told us about it. But here's Cushing, and Cushing is basically, I think he said it's the 8th largest reserve of oil in the world. And basically this is where all the oil in the United States goes. Like this, so it's basically, Cushing is like this small community that you can kind of see there, surrounded by like 9 miles of oil.
Lovely.
So this is where all of it is. And with this huge production, I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, so that's where, go ahead. I'll come back to it. So the Keystone Energy Pipeline is trying to help get that. We currently have a glut of oil in Cushing because of this hydraulic fracturing boom that's producing all this oil from the Vulcan oil fields in North Dakota. And so this Keystone oil pipeline, remember about a year and a half ago, all these folks went to D.C. and they got arrested in front of the White House, and Obama came out and said, okay, we're going to like stop the construction of the XL Energy Pipeline. And we were like, yay, you won. But again, it's kind of like we kind of won, right? So what happened is that this part is the part that Obama is still like he delayed the permit for the stuff that goes across the Ogallala aquifer up here in the Dakotas. It's like one of the biggest aquifers in the U.S. And so he was like, okay, we'll defer the permits for that. However, he did approve right away the construction of this pipeline, which goes from Cushing to this port, because we have this glut of oil that we're trying to get to market. And I mean, this is why there's such a contentious struggle around this pipeline right now, because we're all pretty sure that like no matter who won the election, that this northern part is going to be constructed. It was just a delaying tactic to like appease environmentalists. So what's the next slide? Anyway, so we have this flood of oil in Cushing, and we have more oil than we are consuming in the United States, and where most of this is going to export. So, and actually, surprisingly, most of our oil exports from the United States go to Mexico. We ship the tar sands from the tar sands oil to the United States. We refine it, and then we ship it back to Canada, and it goes to Brazil and a number of other Latin American countries. And actually, very little of it goes to China, which everybody likes to throw China in the mix, but we actually don't ship that much to them. Cool. So that's oil production.
Yeah.
And what's going on with fracking?
So this representing natural gas production.
In the Northeast, I'm going to admit that we don't have a lot of context for what's going on out west.
And we can see that it remained pretty steady until the introduction of hydraulic fracturing as a process for extracting natural gas from oil shale. And it's just kind of skyrocketed from that point. And we also see oil, the production of sweet crude oil expanding as a result of hydrofracturing as well. And this is, we need to find a better map than
this
this.
is horrible. So dated.
But this is a map that shows a lot of the oil shale in the United States, and the green areas are areas that are currently being fracked. And as of now, there are certainly more green areas, and I would argue to say that there are areas that should be brown on there that aren't. So, but it gives you an idea. Here you can see this is the Marcellus oil shale deposit, and this is up here in Pennsylvania where they really was the test ground for hydrofracking, where they started the longest ago, and they're really starting to see the environmental and health impacts of it already, and this is kind of like the warning sign that we have. And we're going to start seeing those effects out here.
And we already are.
And we are.
I kind of disagree with Nick. It's like chronology about now that he's not here, I'm critiquing him. Whatever. But a lot of the context in which the discussion around fracking is happening is really based in this narrative of what's going on in Ohio and Pennsylvania. So a lot of the stories that we're going to be sharing are from that, just because that's where Nick and these folks have been working. And if folks are working on fracking issues in this area, I would really like to talk with you so we can break the narrative of talking about this stuff in terms of the East Coast, because I'm sick of it. I really want to talk about it in terms of the West. Anyways, so there you go. Boom, right? This is your point. This boom of fracking and natural gas and oil production has really shifted the way that coal is being used to power electricity. Coal is still being used very much in the production of for metallurgic purposes. So the creation of steel and concrete, we're still using coal at a very big rate, but not necessarily power our lights. We're using natural gas now instead. And what exactly does Nick say at this point? Fracking has also really impacted the how tar sands and fracking are also deeply connected about how much oil we're producing in the United States versus how much we can send to export. And these things are all related. And then of course uranium is a part of this conversation that we're not presenting about, but as we try to move away from fossil fuels, a lot of people are trying to say uranium is the answer, and folks in this region, I got two, so okay, fuck you. Folks in this region I know have a lot to say about that, so Ethan, what's your question?
So if I could add something else to the mix. From what I understand, right now there's 3 different grids: the West Coast grid, the Southern Texas, and then the East Coast. But there's a plan to build a multi-billion-dollar new superstation facility in southeastern New Mexico that would connect those 3 grids. It's called Tres Amigas.
Ooh.
It got big tax credits in the legislature this year. And they sold it as a renewable energy project because it's being built in a major wind energy area. So they are planning to expand wind farms, but I believe it'll also be used to, for fracking to send energy here.
Gotcha. Good to know. Thank you, Ethan.
In some way, it fails in comparison, but bringing it back to home is a reminder that in areas like the Navajo Reservation and the like, as they continue to use those massive amounts of water, the local water tables drop, and the people themselves, all the indigenous, can no longer use their surface water.
You mean for processing the coal?
Well, as they're using it for processing the coal, the available water for the people is no longer there, so it continues to break down ever more. And having come from the eastern shore of Maryland and having friends up and down the seaboard, I know that a lot of young people are still trying to stand against the fracking in New York, but there's far more people who are signing up for it left and right because they want to be on the forefront of making that money, although of course what most people aren't aware of is that it runs into the watershed, which is the entire eastern seaboard down to the Chesapeake Bay. So there's a lake that runs off of upstate New York that follows through all the way down to Susquehanna. And it's not something that people recognize how wide and completely perilous the waterways are in the air connection.
And we'll talk some about that too, and some of the resistance that people are doing around nest regions, so we'll come back to that. Cool, so we're gonna, any other things about that section, our very graph heavy section?
Do you know the rates of energy or input versus energy gain for the tar sands extraction?
It's something ridiculous.
About 1 to 5,
Yeah.
or up to 1 to 15, sometimes. And if it weren't subsidized, it wouldn't be at all profitable.
Think of it like cattle and grain.
Well, I know it takes like 10 barrels of clean water to process 1 barrel of oil, so it's huge amounts of water processing.
All right. Well, moving on, we're going to keep us rolling because I want to respect everyone's ego. Okay, so that was a lot of big theoretical, graphs, numbers. We're going to shift gears from the graphs and numbers and try to like contextualize. And I'm feeling that y'all have a lot of knowledge about this stuff in the room. So, we're gonna try not to like blow you over with content that you already know. So we're gonna try to base it really in this narrative storytelling process of what's going on for folks in the Southeast, and you might be familiar with these stories too. We want to share this tool with you, so that's what we're gonna do. But